Tonight, 3 winter nights in the US, a North Dakota switchyard where a glove keeps fixing the count, a Vermont pull-off where chains appear without tracks, and an Alaskan cannery whose punch clock won't stay dark. Tell me your city, your local time, and what you're listening on so our night map can circle the world. If the wind called your name from the far end of a yard, would you answer or finish counting first? Lights down. January makes its own rules in Minot. Steel shrinks, gravel goes glassy, and light from the halogens turns into pale coins that hang in the snow like small moons. Rails tick in the cold, the way floorboards tick in an old house. It isn't haunted, it's physics, but the sound gets inside a person the same way. Daniel Cruz works nights as a carman, 36, quiet shoulders, hands that read metal better than eyes can. He walks the line with a mallet, a lamp, and a radio clipped low on his coat so the cord doesn't freeze and tug at his throat. He trusts 3 checks at every stop. Look, touch, listen. All 3 or it doesn't count. He taps a brake shoe and hears the note he wants. He checks a hose coupling, gives it a twist, feels the grit go smooth. He leans into a knuckle and makes sure the pin has dropped for real, not just pretended in the snow. He talks to himself in a small voice that stays close to his scarf. That's how he keeps a rhythm going when the wind keeps cutting the world into pieces. Whiteout starts around 1:12. You never think it begins until it's already full. The sky drops, distance shortens, and hairs on his face turn to needles. The rows of cars fade into short, bright islands, each lamp a dome, each dome a room he can step into and step out of. Everything beyond is blank and moving. If the night shrank the world to the length of your arm, would you keep your pace, or would you start jogging just to feel warm? He keeps his pace. Jogging gets people hurt. He knows a shortcut can trick even good bones. In a year like this, it's the long way that gets you home. Between tracks 3 and 4, a red scarf knots to a post. It faded to rust last winter. Ellis tied it there after a near miss at the West Switch. Reminder, not memorial, the foreman said. Daniel passes it without touching. He believes reminders work better if your glove never fixes them. A single car horn bleeds through the wind from Highway 2. Not a train horn, a road panic stretched thin. He listens, counts to 3, hears only weather. Road people will handle road things, he tells himself. His job is iron and air and keeping simple mistakes from turning large. At 1:25, the lamp over the service shed flickers, swells too bright, then settles. Power does that in cold snaps. He notes it and moves. Then a sound he knows as well as his own boot, a shoe sole scraping a stirrup face. Not his. His traction stays sure. He keeps his weight under him. This scrape has the small grit of rubber correcting on frozen metal. It comes from 2 car lengths ahead behind the belly curve of a tank. "Yard man coming through," he calls, calm, the way you say a door is opening. The scrape stops. Wind returns to being the loudest thing around. He steps to the ladder, plants his left foot, and leans enough to see along the backside of the train. Light dots the yard like a trail. Darkness fills the rest. His radio clicks. Someone somewhere keys and lets go, maybe warming a frozen mic. The shape appears after the second length. Slim, coat too thin for the hour, hair salted white by blown crystals. The shape stands too close to the tank, as if iron could share heat. Daniel brings the lamp up and a face turns away. He catches a cheekbone, a mouth, lashes clotted with ice, then the snow takes it back. "Off the trackside," he says. "Not a bark, a bridge. Come around. Walk with me." No movement. Hands slide against the tank shell, slow, like reading braille on steel. The head tips toward the small space where 2 cars kiss at the couplers. Daniel follows that tip with his eyes and sees what the shape is seeing. a single glove lying on the drawbar. Thumb seam split, pale faux fur along the cuff. Grocery aisle winter, not rated for this. Would you pocket a lost glove to sort later, or leave it where the night seems to want it? He leaves it for the moment. We'll go inside, he says, holding his lamp so the warmth of the beam touches the shape first, not his voice. He points toward the service shed, a rectangle of bad light and better coffee. 30 yards. The wind shifts. It doesn't feel like weather, it feels like a decision. Somewhere to the west a powered switch hums and throws without a call. The broom of snow lifts off the points and dusts the air. That shouldn't happen. Not tonight. Not ever, without an order. He keys the radio. West switch just through, he says. No request. Foreman's voice comes back with a tooth burr growl. Brownouts across 3 districts. Stay clear of motors. Tie off what you can. Keep your head. Copy. He lowers the lamp. The shape turns an inch, sees him, then the glove, then him again. The eyes are young in the way winter makes every face a little childlike. He lifts a spare knit cap out of his pocket, ugly but warm, and offers it on the mallet handle so she doesn't have to take his hand. She slides the cap on, careful as stitches. That breaks him a little. Careful belongs at a kitchen table, not in this wind. Come on, he says, makes a line with the light. 2 poles, 1 door, they walk. 8 steps is a town in a whiteout. The shed lamp flickers, holds. He shoulders the door open. Inside is a recipe a body understands. Heat beginning, coffee bitter, grease, old wood. June, the name arrives later, but the person is here now, sits in the nearest chair. He turns the heater low so it doesn't bite skin, pours coffee that is more survival than taste, and sets it in her hands. She cups it like a candle. What's your name? He asks, because a badge will want it. June, she says, like she borrowed the month. Okay, June, we'll call somebody for you. He inches toward the phone, hears the thump along the wall outside, slow and even. Not a boot, not a tarp, a knock that isn't a knuckle, almost like a zipper-tooth kissing glass. He opens the door to the width his shoulder allows. Snow presses its cold face in. Nothing stands there, just the glove on the service windowsill. He didn't bring it in, he didn't touch it. Still here it sits. He picks it up. It's wet but warm, as if it hadn't left a wrist long. June rises without scraping the chair. Eyes fixed on the glove like it's the only thing in the right colour in a world that went false. Please, she says, put it back. If a room goes quiet when you move one small thing, do you move it back to where it was? He does. He returns to the tank car, aligns the glove on the drawbar, exactly as he found it. Thumb split up, fur to the pin. The yard breathes once. A bulb steadies over track 2. Far away, a horn loses its panic and becomes distance again. He turns and finds June at the door, not shivering, past that, ready to say the part of her night that will decide the rest of his. Snow builds along his collar, while he listens to the wind decide between him and the door. He is good at waiting. That's what winter teaches men like him. You don't beat it. You stand well under it. And when the wind finally chooses, it chooses to let the story in. The service shed is a small country with its own weather. Warm trying, coffee steam painting the window, the heater breathing like a tired dog. June stands, cup in both hands, eyes pinned to the yard, like there's a line out there she promised to keep straight. She tells it in thin strips at first, a sedan on the shoulder, heater dying slow enough to convince 2 people to try something they shouldn't, a loose gate at the chain link where drifts made steps. Lights beyond the fence that looked like safety because safety often wears a bright jacket. If the plan weakens in the cold, do you push harder or slow down and take the count again? You hear yourself think, because some questions answer themselves. They cut toward the yard, one bigger, one smaller. They laughed in the first minute because the first minute always pretends the story is short. Then the wind found its idea and wrote across their path. They reached the dark side of a tank and the bigger one said, "Wait here, I'll go find a door." The smaller one, June, set a glove down on the drawbar to mark she'd be back from waiting. It was a child's trick, but child tricks work. Leave something of yours so the place can't forget you. And the other person? Daniel asks. June looks at the heater the way people look at bad news that's trying to be kind. He thought I was behind him until he was inside. The scrape on the shed wall returns, slow, level, not a branch, not here. Daniel turns the heater down so sound can lay flat in the room. The scrape passes the small window pane and becomes a soft, deliberate knock. Thin metal tapping glass. June's voice doesn't jump. "It wants the count," she says. "It wants it back the way it was when we said we'd do it. Counts matter here. Axles, car lengths, switch numbers. How many steps from a ladder to the ground when you can't see your boots? The quiet math that keeps bodies where machines can see them. He knows that in his bones, the way you know your name in fog. The radio hisses with brown-out chatter. Foreman calls blocks to clear. Somewhere a relay throws and hums, a powered switch, shifting when nobody asked. Daniel keys the mic. "Foreman, I've got a civilian in the shed. Power's unstable at the west. Requesting sheriff when roads allow." "Copy. Hold what you've got. Keep her inside. If that west motorcycle's on its own, keep clear." "Copy." He closes the door, sets the bar, and looks at June. "We'll wait for a truck. No one's walking that highway now." June shakes her head once, not stubborn, scheduled. "Not yet. I need to put it right." "The glove?" He regrets the word as soon as he says it like that. Small, dismissive. Tonight is not dismissing. "The count," she says again. "It stopped for me. It kept going for him." If you and someone you love count the same things but not on the same beat, which one of you bends? Daniel puts another mug under the thin stream, adds a fingertip of sugar because survival needs mercy sometimes, and hands it over. June holds the cup, doesn't drink. She looks out through the fogged glass until her breath opens a dime-sized window in it. The glove sits in its place, obedient as a marker in a ritual. He thinks about calling her family. He doesn't have a number. He thinks about calling highway patrol. They won't fetch fast in this. He thinks about what happens to men who try to carry people before those people decide to be carried. He has scars from tools, not people, but he's seen enough to know the difference. "What happens if we walk it together?" he asks. Slow. A line to the coupler, then back. June nods, but not to him, to the line. She sets the cup down, finds the knit cap's edge, snugging it. He cracks the door. The wind leans in like a neighbor with too much to say. They step out under it and into the yard's faint geometry. Breath hangs like thin banners. The lamp makes a tunnel in front of them. Gravel starts to lose its name and become just hardness. Daniel takes lead and keeps his feet where ballast holds best, not where it looks smooth. He names the safe spots out loud as if the ground listens. Here, here. Skip the tie plate. Here. They reach the tank's end. The glove rests where he set it. He crouches to show that he respects the level it lives on. June does the small, exact thing he saw her do before. She straightens the cuff by a breath, thumbs split up, fur toward the pin. Then she tips her head and listens, not to the yard, to the count in her chest. "What number?" he asks. 3, she says. "I had 3, he had 4. He hears it land. She stopped, as told. He went on, as decided. They can't heal that with talk. The yard wants a ceremony small enough to fit on iron. He holds the lamp so it doesn't blind their hands and says, "Okay, we'll make 4 together. 1 for you, 1 for him, 1 for the glove, 1 for the yard." He doesn't know why that feels right, only that it settles something ragged in the air. They count, not words, breaths. Each breath a step back from the coupler, slow, placing weight where iron won't trick them. 1, 2, 3. The 4th catches in June's chest like a key in a stubborn lock. She pushes it through, the heater back in the shed, kicks once, as if it heard. The west switch hums again and throws itself back to normal like a guilty thought settling down. The lamp over track 2 steadies for good. Far on Highway 2, a plow grinds by, sifting cinders. The world doesn't cheer, it simply stops arguing as hard. If a place loosens its jaw after you do a small right thing, do you call that luck? Or do you call that listening? They turn to the shed. The wind doesn't shove, it just attends. Daniel keeps the path straight with the lamp and his habit of naming safe and not safe. Inside, he bars the door and turns the heater up 2 clicks. He doesn't speak first. He lets the room talk, hiss, hum, sigh, and waits for June's breathing to choose a speed that belongs to life again. She does drink now, not much, enough to signal to her body that it isn't alone. "Tell me his name," Daniel says, and the night tilts toward being about people again. "Caleb," she says. The first warm word in the room. He was my brother." The heater ticks. The radio quiets, as if the frequency leaned in. "Caleb," Daniel repeats, so the room learns it. "We'll call the sheriff when the trucks catch up. We'll fetch him if we can't wait." June looks at the window. He went to find the door. He probably made it. He probably stood in someone's light and thought I was right behind him, and then he turned and... She stops before the picture finishes. Daniel turns the radio down. "If he made a door, we'll find which one." He points his lamp toward the far sheds out the window. 3 spots open at night. Fuel foreman's this one. We'll check foreman's first." June shakes her head. "No, a different door. One with red light. Not exit red. Warmer, close to the ground." He takes that in. There isn't a door like that on his map, but maps change when you're not looking. Or when a whiteout decides it wants to edit. The knock comes again, metal on glass, 3 even taps that would feel like nothing any other night. But tonight they line up with their breath count. He opens the door to the shoulder, and there on the sill sits a second glove, twin to the first, seam split along the thumb, fur, trim clotted with ice, warm enough to be recently worn. He doesn't look for tracks in the drift. The yard isn't offering proof, it's offering direction. June takes the second glove with both hands, not like a lost thing found, but like a clock hand moved to the correct minute. She sets both gloves together on the table, cuffs touching, palms down. She breathes out in a way that sounds like someone letting a name go where names go when winter keeps them. "Okay," she says. Not surrender, permission. "Okay," Daniel echoes. "We'll go find your brother." He keys the radio and asks for any report of a civilian sighting near the foreman's office, near the fuel bay, near any door with a light that might be read as warm. Negative all around, or silence, thanks to the brownouts. He looks back at June. "There's one more place," he says, surprising himself with the certainty. Old Switchman's shack by the West Points, boarded, but the lantern shelf sits low and the glass throws red when the emergency bulb catches. Looks like a low door if you don't know it. June nods once, eyes clear. That one. If the map in your head changes because someone else remembers it differently, do you fight your map or try theirs? He takes the wool blanket off the back of the chair and drapes it around her shoulders. He grabs a second lamp so they can make 2 islands of light instead of 1. He looks at the gloves on the table and leaves them there on purpose, cuffs touching. Not every right thing belongs in a pocket. They step back into the whiteout, which doesn't feel as sure of itself now. The halogens don't grow brighter, the dark just loses some certainty. The yard's geometry returns by inches. Daniel hears his own rules settle back into him. Look, touch, listen, all three, or it doesn't count. Ahead, the west switch sits quiet, points clean, motor silent. Beyond it, the old shack is only a dent in the night until the emergency bulb flares to life, a low red square, warm as an invitation. "Caleb," Daniel says softly into the wind, not calling like a rescuer, but speaking like a man announcing a door. "We're coming to you now." And the whiteout, finally, stops teaching and starts letting them pass. The west end thins into fewer lights and more decision. Beyond the points, the old switchman's shack sits crouched under rime, a dark square with a single pane that throws out a low red glow whenever the emergency bulb catches power. In whiteout, that glow can look like a door left open to somewhere warmer. Daniel keeps the lamp low so drift eddies don't blind them. He names safe ground as they go. Here, skip, here. And lets June set the pace. Breath makes small flags in front of their mouths, then tears off into nothing. The yard feels undecided, like a dog that might bite or might lean into your hand. 10 yards out, the wind lays down for one breath and they see the shack clearly. The boards are silver and tight from seasons of squeeze and thaw. The latch has been wired for years. Nobody uses this as a warm room anymore. 50 years of gloves left thumbprints on the crossbar. Beneath the window, snow is shallow where wind scoured it. One clean patch shows prints, not many. 2 sets, crossing. One heavier stride that circles toward the door and stops. One lighter set that begins and returns to the track, like a coin tossed and pulled back. "Look," June says, and Daniel angles the light. Boot prints, not fresh in the way you want, but not vanished. Square lugs that match the pattern in the road, salt at the service shed door. Caleb's boots left those when they first tried to decide about the fence. Brothers share brands like recipes. If it were you, would you call his name and risk the wind smearing it? Or hold your breath and read the ground first? Daniel doesn't call. He reads. The heavier stride scuffs at the door, then slides down a few inches in a way that belongs to someone whose legs have been out in this too long. Hypothermia makes knees argue. It also makes hands foolish. Men open coats when they should close them. Men sit down when they should stand. Men see doors where boards are. Lantern shelf is low, Daniel says almost to himself. Glass throws warm when the emergency bulb rattles. He puts his palm on the wood, skin inside glove, glove on plank, and feels a temperature that isn't weather, not heat. Recent cold, cold exchanged. A body was here, not a ghost. Body cold leaves a print like any other claim. June kneels, then stops herself. Kneeling means time, and time is a thing winter charges interest on. She keeps crouched, fingers hovering an inch above the scuffed line, as if touching without stealing will help. "He came here," she says. "He thought this was the door I meant. He thought I was behind." Daniel puts the lamp in her hands. "Hold this steady," he says. "I need both of mine." He leans his shoulder and offers the latch his weight. The wire bites into the jamb. The door groans a dry, boarded sound. He sets the mallet's handle under the bottom edge as a lever and lifts just enough to make a gap. The smell that comes out is old creosote, dust that learned to sleep hard, and the iron breath of winter rooms. Inside is a rectangle of dark with the red pane hanging in it like a small, false sunset. The emergency bulb swells and shrinks as the power grebes. The shelf is low, the glass is thick. A reflector curled with time still stands on the bracket, and a layer of frost makes lace on its rim. On the inner wall, scratched into paint with a nail or a key, they both see it at once. 3, 4. Below that, a short grease pencil line, the kind a yard man carries in his pocket, has been dragged once, then twice, then failed, and Daniel feels how much a small mark can carry. He's spent his career trusting chalk on steel. He angles the light toward the floor. No body, no coat, just the hard curve of a man's back briefly leaned here, then gone. The red pane flickers again. A wind seam sings under the sill. Caleb! This time, June uses the name, not as a call, but as a gentle instruction to the air, like telling a cat to come down from a step. She turns, following a feeling rather than a sound, and points to the lee side, the place where wind keeps a pocket when it favours wood over iron. Daniel swings out with her. They find him there, half sitting in a drift hollow, head down, the collar of his coat pulled open in that backwards way cold makes. One glove missing, one glove on. Mouth a little open, skin chalked by the snow's dull breath. Eyes not closed, but not exactly seeing. Hypothermia puts a person between, like a two-station platform with no train. If you reach someone and they looked away from your voice, would you lie to them to keep them here? Would you say the car is warm, the coffee's ready, that the door's already open? Caleb, Daniel says, soft and level, letting the name do more work than his tone. He does what he was taught, even though his training was for iron first and people second. He doesn't rub hands or feet. He doesn't force standing. He checks breathing with his cheek because winter tricks eyes. He feels it, thin but present. He checks pulse at the neck, under jaw, slow and lazy, but not gone. He brings the collar together, buttons shut the wrong persuasion. He takes the blanket from June's shoulders and wraps it around the three of them at once, Caleb's chest, June's forearms, Daniel's sleeve, sealing the edge, so wind can't argue. "Stay with us," June says to her brother. "Stay with me. We're all here." She says, "We," and that fixes something that the glove could not. Daniel keys the radio with his chin against his shoulder. "Foreman, we've located the male at the West Shack. Hypothermic, breathing slow. Need EMS at Yard West Gate. If the road's blocked, send the high rail from fuel. 2 hands to load." The foreman's voice arrives smaller, like it's being ferried in a spoon. "Copy. High rail on the way. Fuel crew's got blankets and a backboard. How bad?" "Bad enough to count minutes," Daniel says, and he means it literally. He looks at June. "We warm him slow, we keep his breath honest, we don't let him stand." They angle their bodies like walls. June keeps his face close to Caleb's. She finds his eyes with hers, not strong, steady. "It's June," she says. "You're not alone. You went to the door. You did the right thing. I was behind you. I'm here." She does not ask him to be brave. She asks him to be present, which is harder. Daniel watches skin cues and checks in the rhythm he trusts. Look, touch, listen. Look, lips pale, not bluing worse. Pupils tracking a little now, not aimless. Touch, chest rising, shallow, but with a hint of correction. Listen, a breath that remembers what it was taught. Tell him a story he already knows, Daniel says, and June nods. She gives Caleb the smallest inventory of their childhood winter. How the furnace thumped before it got loud, how the kitchen window made halos on streetlights when the glass frosted, how their mother used to tape paper over the keyhole because she swore the draft could count as a second door. She keeps words simple because simple is what stays. Daniel marks time without looking at a watch. 30 counts between checks. 30 counts between names. If you had to buy a minute, what would you pay with? Words, warmth, or the promise you'll do the count right this time? The high rail comes in a slow, careful whine over the joints, orange beacons stuttering in the white like a heartbeat. 2 fuel hands jump down with a board, a foil blanket, and that look crews get when they finally have a thing they can do. They slide the board close without jolting. Daniel and June hold Caleb's shoulders while the fuel men work the foil under and over, keeping heat where it belongs. Caleb moans once, a good sound, ugly as life. Daniel hears it land in June like a match catching. They move, all 4, in the slow choreography Winter insists on. Onto the high rail. Into the cab where someone has stripped off a coat to cover a seat. Daniel stays hanging off the step, fingers hooked to the rail, lamp turned in so faces aren't flat. "Foreman," he says into the mic. "Coming in west. Prep the gate. Get EMS to fuel bay door. We're not waiting highway." The foreman doesn't argue. The yard knows nights when rules are a luxury. "Copy. Gate open. Sheriff's looped. They'll meet at fuel." June keeps talking, not loud, not urgent. "Blue bike," she says. "You hated the way the chain squeaked, remember? You used to tell me to hold my breath under the bridge until I saw our mailbox, and I never could, and you'd laugh without being mean." Do that laugh. Caleb's eyes flicker, not much, enough to bring June's face closer, so it's the only geography he has to cross to make it. By the time they reach the fuel bay, the plow that ground by earlier has cut an artery to the yard, and a sheriff's Tahoe noses in with lights off, just the parking lamps burning like polite candles. EMS hustles, grave-faced and competent. They take Caleb, ask Daniel 2 quick questions he can answer, and 1 he can't. How long? He offers honest guesses and the kind of details that carry weight. Red pain, 3, 4 on the wall, 1 glove first, then 2, hypothermic behavior, slow, then less slow. The medic nods, already moving. Slow warm, no rubbing, no heroics. He's got his own work to do. The gurney rolls out and takes a soft left toward heat, saline, things a yard can't provide. June stands there with her hands suddenly empty. She looks like she might tip with the wind. Daniel finds the second blanket and gives it back to her shoulders, not to fix anything, just to finish the motion that Winter interrupted. "Ride with them," he says. "I'll give your names." He turns to the deputy to handle questions. Why she was in the yard, whether trespass notices matter tonight. If the west switch is known to wander, it isn't. What evidence exists that power cycled? Several men will say it did. Several bulbs would testify if bulbs talked. The deputy nods when he doesn't know where to put a thing. He writes 3 to 4 with his pencil, like he's not sure if it's evidence or poetry. He does not write "gloves moved themselves." He writes "gloves recovered," which is what a man can safely bring to court. The ambulance door closes. June's face behind the glass is white and specific. She lifts the knit cap's edge with 1 finger and gives Daniel a look that isn't thanks. It's a link. The siren does not light. Roads are bad. They roll quiet into the kind of night that has always tested families. Daniel turns back to the yard. The Whiteout looks tired. It has pushed all day and finally agrees to let petty things own themselves again. He walks once more to the shack. He puts his palm on the 3-4, like a man greeting an old inscription in a church. He doesn't believe in miracles here, only in math that behaves. If a place gives back what it almost took, do you leave an offering? Or do you close the door and go back to work so the night can heal without you in it? He doesn't leave whiskey or coins. He does one small right thing. He closes the shack door all the way. Not to hide anything, to finish a motion. The latch, wired and stubborn, sets with a sound like old teeth, learning a new bite. He walks toward the service shed. The west switch sits quiet. The red scarf on the post between tracks 3 and 4, doesn't move at all now. Inside, the 2 gloves lie on the table where June laid them, cuffs touching. He leaves them there. Not every found thing belongs to a future. Behind him, the heater ticks. Outside, the snow finally decides to fall straight. Morning comes without ceremony. The halogens click off one by one, as if told a secret. Yard day shift men arrive in trucks that whine from cold starts, boots hard on gravel, voices kept small out of respect for the last 12 hours. Daniel is still on the clock when the dispatcher rings in with the tone they use for things that could have been worse. Patient stabilized at St. Alexius, hypothermia moderate. Good response to active rewarm, will observe. Family at bedside. The voice is clinical, the meaning isn't. June's brother is alive. If relief comes soft instead of loud, do you trust it more? Daniel does. He trusts any good thing that arrives embarrassed. He hangs the radio back in its cradle and lets his hand stay there for a breath, like it needs the weight. The sheriff stops by the foreman's office mid-morning with a clipboard and the courtesy to remove his hat indoors. He asks for the night in sequence. Daniel gives it to him clean. He leaves out nothing a court could use and keeps in everything a winter worker would insist on. When the West switched through with no order, what the emergency bulbs did, where the prints lay, how June counted 3, and the night held her there like a hand to the chest. Electrical? The deputy asks. Power browns make motors misbehave, Daniel says, but motors don't throw twice with no call and start and end correct. He doesn't add what he felt, something that wanted 4. He lets the 3, 4, speak for itself. They walk to the shack. The deputy photographs the door, the shelf, the flickering red pane that is now just a pane because morning power is sure of itself. He images the scratch on the paint. He asks about vandal kids and bored brakemen. Daniel shakes his head. The scratch is deep, a pocket knife or a switch key. The grease pencil smear below it looks like a hand that was late to learn its own script. Who wired the latch? The deputy asks. Before my time, Daniel says. The year the heaters were pulled out. No one's had a reason to come here. He looks down at the drift hollow where Caleb's back made a curve in snow. Wind filled it in, respectful, like a groundskeeper would. Back at the service shed, the gloves remain on the table, cuffs touching, seam splits facing up, fur clotted with last night's crystals. The deputy bags them with a professional gentleness that surprises Daniel. He labels them not as evidence, but as personal property recovered. He checks the sill where Daniel found one glove in the night and finds nothing worth a report. No prints, no scuffs, just the smooth of old paint and cold. You won't be charged, he tells Daniel simply, catching the tension that sits in men who do right by trespassers. You and your crew did what you're supposed to do when people get stupid in weather. That's the job. Any strange in the story stays strange. Strange stays strange. It's not a legal standard, but it's the truest thing said in the office all morning. The deputy leaves, the foreman returns to counting cars. Day shift carmen take assignments from a clipboard and stretch their backs. Work doesn't pause to admire the avoided edge. It fills the available day. Daniel's shift ends with the first good sun that the yard has seen in weeks. He signs out, peels the radio from his coat, and looks at the red scarf on the post. The knot has swollen with ice. The scarf's rust colour is suddenly, weirdly, beautiful against the pale. He thinks of Ellis, who tied it as a reminder, and then went to daze. He thinks of how many reminders a place needs before a lesson sticks. On his way to the lot, Daniel cuts, not for convenience, but to pass by the west switch one more time. He checks the points like a man patting a dog's shoulder. Habit, not suspicion. The motor sits quiet, box humming a contented 60 cycle. He kneels and drags his glove along the throw rod, just to feel how winter made it bite last night. It's honest iron again. Down the access road, the ambulance bay door stands open at St. Alexius. The sun has the gall to be cheerful on the snow piled in the hospital lot. Inside, June sits in a chair by a window with a view of a wooden fence that is committed to being plain. She has Daniel's ugly knit cap in her hands, turning it like a worry stone. He left it without meaning to. He knows he didn't, but he also knows he did. Caleb sleeps under a thin white sheet and a wider warm one. The monitor draws a lazy, reliable line that makes a polite sound every time his heart remembers its job. His lips are chapped and pinker than last night. His hair is ungoverned. He looks like a person who lost a fight to a lake and lived. When Daniel and June step to the doorway, Caleb opens his eyes briefly, the way people do when a room changes weight, and he recognizes the knit cap first. "You owe me a bike chain," he whispers, voice sanded down to basics. "I know," June says. And the way she says it makes the snow outside the window look like a good idea, invented by someone kind. If you had to fold last night into one sentence you could live with, would you pick a technical sentence or a human one? Daniel doesn't speak much. He stands where he won't block the window and lets the room cast around for language that won't crack. He tells a short version of the yard to a nurse who asks politely, what kind of place collects men in this shape? He thanks no one because the room doesn't need thanks yet. It needs quiet that feels chosen, not forced. A volunteer wheels in a cart with coffee and muffins that look better than they taste. June refuses the muffin and takes the coffee, then swaps, then laughs at herself for not knowing what living wants from her thinky hands this morning. She sets the knit cap on the windowsill. When she does, Daniel expects warmth. The cap is cold. It became an object again overnight. The sheriff steps in, nods to everybody, asks 2 simple questions, and leaves a card. "Call if anything about last night grows teeth after daylight," he says with a half-smile that respects how stories gain courage once the sun arrives. "Do you think all that—" June starts. "Was power cycling," Daniel says, finishing the sentence she can show but not say. He watches her eyes and lets the answer hang between them, not an argument, a place to put fear down without breaking it. "And also count," he adds, quiet. "Places like that care about count," she nods. "I'll remember the count." She touches the cuff of her sleeve like there's fur there. There isn't. Habit makes ghosts where gloves once were. By afternoon, the yard goes back to normal in the way yards do. Steel, schedules, the ritual stubbornness of men and machines agreeing to behave. Daniel sleeps a little and wakes with the taste of cold in his mouth. He eats soup that doesn't deserve applause and still eats it like a trophy. He leaves the television dark. He sits with the thought that the world is not eager to explain itself and that this is not an insult. It's a protection. At dusk he drives back out, not to the hospital, not to the foreman's desk, but to the yard. The shift he isn't on moves through the geometry he knows bone deep. The red scarf is still on the post. He has scissors in his pocket, a dumb idea he brought without thinking. He takes them out and puts them back. Reminders work better when your glove never fixes them. He walks to the service shed. On the table where the gloves lay, there is a chalk mark he didn't make. 4. Just that. The cuffs are gone. Maybe the deputy returned them to family. Maybe the hospital wanted to log personal effects. Maybe June carried them away like talismans. It doesn't matter which. The mark is the important part. The count concluded, not happy, complete. If an answer arrives as a number instead of a story, do you accept it anyway? He does. He wipes the chalk with the side of his hand and feels the small grit of it, the way chalk dies to make room for a blank. He boils fresh coffee that tastes like burned wood and thanks it privately for being worse than last night's. He writes a note on the board a man can read even when tired. West switch. Cycling during brownout. Check box. Check ground. No unsafe enter. He writes it in block letters so Winter can't misconstrue. When he steps back out, snow starts again, but with manners. The halogens glow like moons that someone dimmed to the correct setting. Trains speak to each other in metal syllables. A road horn peals far off, not panicked, just naming an intersection. He walks the tracks as if he's being watched by a thing that needs proof of his respect. He gives it. Look, touch, listen. All three, or it doesn't count. On Highway 2, a Tahoe rolls by with a familiar knit cap in the passenger window. The driver's hand lifts once, a small, tired wave that is not farewell, not summoning, just recognition. He lifts his in return. Behind him, the old shack keeps its boards, the red pane dark now, the scratch inside it waiting for someone else's winter. 3, 4, not a riddle, an instruction, a promise kept. If the wind speaks your name from the far end of a yard, answer if you must, but count first. Winter respects a finished motion, so do the living. Blue hour hangs over Route 73 like a thin scarf. It isn't night, isn't morning, the light just decides to hold its breath. Pines stand shoulder to shoulder. The snowpack throws a cold glow that makes shadows look like water. Plows run before the world wakes here, so that school buses and bread trucks find a path through the notch when daylight finally climbs over the ridge. Her name is Mara Ellison, 34. Winter highway crew, 3 seasons straight, plus a farm kid childhood that taught her how to look at a sky and guess what's coming. She runs Unit 12, an old International with a V plow up front and fresh chains she checked with her hands before the shift. You can tell a lot in winter by touch. A loose link sings wrong. A tight one hums clean. She starts at 4 and heads west to east, from the farm flats to the part where the mountain tries to take the road back. The radio keeps a polite chatter. Salt status, a deer at mile marker 11, a driver who found a mailbox asleep in the wrong lane. Thermal cracks make the blade clack in a familiar beat, and the salt spinner scribbles its dry music onto the rutted center line. The first odd thing is small enough to ignore. It lives in the sound that comes under the engine when the truck tows past the old Civilian Conservation Corps pull-off. A chain clink, exactly at her speed, but a hair behind it. Like another truck shadowing her, link for link. She eases down to listen. It eases down too. You ever match steps with someone on a sidewalk and feel the moment you fall into the same rhythm? You don't plan it. It just happens. What would you do if the same thing happened to your tires and the second set didn't belong to a truck you could see? Mara keeps the blade down and does her work. That's her way. The county pays for lanes, not mysteries. But when the pull-off appears again an hour later, after her turnaround at the salt shed, the same syncopated clink rides under her cab, 1 half-beat behind her own chain's voice. She clicks the radio and asks if anyone else is on the grade. Negative. A distant eastbound 10 minutes out. That's all. At the next wide shoulder, she sets the brake, swings down, and kneels to check. Knees in snow, glove on steel, breath coming white. Her chains are honest, tension strap firm, crosslink seated, no loose tails to sing wrong. She stands, listens, silence heavier than the trees. She climbs back in, sets the spinner, nudges forward. The second sound comes back, faint and faithful. She glances in the mirror for a blue light, a county decal, any witness. Nothing but her own tail spread narrowing behind her like a gravel river. Blue hour deepens toward real day. The ridge ahead grows a rim of nickel light. She passes the church turn. She passes the clapboard house with the red star. She passes a Subaru sleeping nose down in a drift with a handwritten sign in the window. Back by 9. The plow throws its dirty arc. The chain echo holds its place. When she reaches the top and starts down the hairpins, she sets the blade higher to keep from scooping half the mountain onto the driver in the valley. Downshifts, steady. A fox ghosts across the opposite lane, tail banded with snow. The mirror shows nothing but pale air and pine trunks. The echo fades as if the other truck decided to pull off. At the maintenance yard, she logs her first pass on the whiteboard. Salted, drifts light, wind moving at the cut, visibility fair, and refills. The kettle on the workbench ticks like a tiny engine. She pours into a steel mug and warms her chin on the rim before she drinks. Ray from nights is still there, rubbing his shoulders with that old hockey injury and pointing his cigarette at the map like it cares. Chains, he says, like it's a greeting. Checked, Mara says. On yours, he says. On something else too. Heard a set riding me to the county line. Didn't see a truck. Brown out in Minot made a switch throw last week. Someone mutters by the sandhopper. Power's got opinions this winter. Mara doesn't answer that. She finishes her coffee and wipes the lip of the mug on her jacket so the next person can like her without knowing why. She loads salt. She checks links again. She pulls back out when her mark hits the clock and the door buzzes her into the cold. The second pass begins the way these passes always do, muscle memory wrapped in new weather. She drops the blade, lets the truck find the rut it shaved an hour ago, and rides it like a hand on a rail. The radio gives a school delay. The sky gains colour below the clouds, a weak peach someone spilled in the snow. When she reaches the CCC pull-off, she's ready to hear the echo again. It arrives on cue, chain on chain, a half-beat behind. There's a fresh set of prints in the pull-off. She almost misses them because winter loves to hide in its own brightness. 4 ovals where tyres pressed in when the snow was still powder. No tracks leading in, no tracks leading out. The wind should have smoothed them by now. Instead, they look new. Clean walls, crisp edges, the snow inside them a shade darker like it learned a new name. She idles, blade up, and angles the truck nose first into the pull-off, wide lights washing the hollow. The prints sit there like open hands. She squints at the pattern. Chains. You can see the crosshatch where links bit and released, as the tyres rolled a single car length and then changed their mind. If you saw tyre marks with chains where no one drove in and no one drove out, would you climb down to touch, or keep the cab sealed and pretend the road asked nothing of you? Mara kills the spinner and sets the brake. She swings down, boots crunching that quiet crunch that belongs to well below freezing days. The wind is mild here, the cliff face shouldering it away. She stands inside the print. It fits nothing like her truck. Narrower, shorter. Not a town plow, a pickup, maybe. Or the memory of one. She presses a gloved knuckle into the crosshatch. The snow gives under pressure and holds the dent. New, so new that it should belong to a truck still cooling a block somewhere. She hears nothing. The echo chains have paused too, as if the other driver killed their engine at the same moment to listen. She steps backward out of the print and follows where tracks should be. Nothing. The shoulder's skin is smooth and already crusted. If a pickup rolled through, the crust would have shattered like candy. It hasn't. It shines unbroken. The prints don't connect to anything. They just exist. She looks out across the drop. Trees, then a cut of river, then a farm. A dark speck moves near the barn and becomes a person in a parka. A flock of turkeys drifts along a hedgerow and turns as one, like a thought turning over. No blue light, no tyre dust hanging, just January carrying itself like it always does, heavy and without apology. Back in the cab, she sets the heater a tick higher and lets the windshield sweepers argue with the new flurries. The radio asks for an ETA at the East School. She figures the hill, the bridge, the curve in town where the bakery throws wet steam onto the street and makes slick that doesn't look like slick. 20, she says. The echo comes back as she eases out, faithful, a half-beat late, as if she taught it the song and it's learning in her wake. She doesn't tell anyone on this pass. She just does her job and keeps her mind straight. At the East School, kids in snow pants bunch at a bus stop like planets in a small system. She slows another 5 under the limit and raises the blade so the wave at the curb doesn't catch their boots. One of them turns to the noise and raises a mitten. She raises a hand from the wheel. The mother beside them looks relieved to see a plow and forgets to be annoyed about the ridge left at the driveway. That's how mornings forgive nights here, slowly, through small trades. When she turns back toward the grade, the sky opens enough to show honest daylight. Blue hour finally picks a side. The chain echo seems to decide too. It fades near the town line, like a radio station you lose between hills. It returns at the CCC pull-off a third time. She's ready, and she doesn't fight the impulse that rises into her throat like something that belongs there. She clicks the mic and says to the air, and to whoever will hear, Unit 12 holding 10 at the pull-off for a chain check. Nobody objects. The county wants safe more than fast. She steps down into a world that feels as if it moved a chair while she blinked. The 4 prints have multiplied. 8 now. 2 sets, side by side, nested like quotes. Same width, same crosshatch, still no tracks leading in or out. The wind rubs her cheek and leaves none of its fingerprints here. Every edge is clean. Okay, she says, but only inside her breathing. Not to fill the air, to steady her hands. She takes the short welder's hammer from behind her seat and drags its blunt face across the print. The snow inside is dense, like someone pressed weight through chain and into the layer below. A light crust has formed over the untouched shoulder, but inside the prints the snow stayed soft as if saved. And then the sound arrives without the truck, the linky slide of chains starting from rest, a 1-2-1-2 that every mountain town knows by winter 8. It comes from the tree line, from shadow, from a point that refuses to be a point. Her body recognizes it before her mind does. She looks without thinking where the sound would be if the truck were present. The narrow sprays of powder rise in 4 little sighs at the end of the print pair, the way powder leaps when tires begin to turn. There's no vehicle to make them, just the act of beginning. Would you wave a truck through if you couldn't see it? Or would you stand still and test what the air does around you? Mara doesn't move. She keeps her boots out of the imagined lane and lets breath come slow so she can measure everything else. The invisible tires crawl half a car length. The prints extend by half a car length, clean-sided and cross-hatched like the first 4. The spray falls back. The sound settles into a light idle. There's a voice in her head that belongs to her father, the one who taught her to lift the hood and listen to misfires like they were old stories. He would say, "Machines tell you what they need. Don't argue." She chooses to treat the sound like a request, not a threat. She steps to the mouth of the pull-off and stands, as if she's flagging for a real truck. 1 palm up, hold, half turn of the wrist, follow. The chain echo waits a heartbeat and then, like a driver matching a marshal, eases out of the prints and onto the lane she just ploughed. Her truck's hood lifts a fraction as weight leaves the hollow she made with her own tires. She feels the small shift as if another bumper slid even with hers. She climbs back in, clips the belt, drops the blade, and merges back onto the grade. The invisible vehicle tucks itself behind her again, half a breath off, close enough to teach her that the road has 2 sets of chains on it now. She checks her mirror, even though it helps nothing. The glass gives her only pine trunks and pale air. She drives anyway, suddenly aware of how careful hands can be when they know they're being watched by something that needs a lane. She doesn't say this on the radio, she just drives the cleanest pass of her month and imagines a bumper where a reflection should be, and swears to herself that if the Echo asks for another pull-off, she will make space for it. Blue hour is gone. Day has rules, but some things keep their own. By the third loop, the route has the feel of a song she can hum without thinking. Down through town where the bakery slicks the curb with steam that freezes as soon as it leaves the door. Past the school where boots line up like small boats, and a man with a shovel salutes the plow the way plows salute shovels. Up into the cut where the wind turns smart and tries to teach drifts how to grow edges. The chain Echo keeps pace. It falls back on the straightaway where trucks get lazy and closes the half beat again on the turns, like a good driver shadowing a better one. When she brakes, it hangs in the air. When she feeds throttle gently to keep the blade from biting too deep, it follows, equally gentle. She understands now that it isn't a joke. It's a partner she didn't ask for. You ever realize something is trying to match you, and the only way to stop being afraid is to give it something to match on purpose? She gives it signals, 2 taps on the brake before a blind corner. It taps, too, a wider arc at the hairpin so a downhill car could pass between if one appears. The Echo widens with her. At the church turn, she flicks the right indicator, even though she isn't turning. The lane is narrow there, and people who live on this road see the wink and hug their own line. The chain Echo clicks along and pretends to signal as well. She hears the faint click in the dash that can only exist in a cab. Yet she hears it, matching, tucked close as a thought. At the CCC pull-off, the prints have doubled again. 16 now, a full-sized pickup worth of comings and goings, except there's no path to town, no path to the trees, no dragged snow, no scuffed crust, just a row of answers without questions. She pulls in and sets the brake because she needs to try something before the day eats this moment and calls it a winter story people will nod at and forget. She stands in the mouth of the pull-off, palms open so the air can see there's no argument coming. "Okay," she says out loud, because sometimes you have to name the conversation even if there's only you. If you're following me, I'll give you the smooth line. If you're leading, show me where you want it. Silence presses on the ears here in a way that makes them ring. Then the chain Echo starts from rest again, half a car length forward, and turns its invisible wheels to the right at a shuttered picnic sign. The tires that don't show themselves produce fresh prints that do. They roll across the crust without breaking it except where they choose to mark. They take a path to the edge of the drop, where guardrail posts lean like tired men. They stop at a single post with a small brass tag bolted near the base. The tag carries a number. The number is 9. Mara's throat grows tight in a way she doesn't like. She knows these marker tags. The county logged the rails 3 summers ago, counted them for replacement, plotted each on a map, tied them to maintenance notes. She didn't do that job, but she saw the folder. Post 9 sits above the ravine where the old timber bridge washed out in 82. A boy died there when the river ran brown and tall. The story is still in the town because grief stays longer than asphalt. She steps to the rail and puts a glove on the tag. Cold eats through the leather and tells her it's real. She looks down the drop. Pines and naked maple arms weave a net over ice and water that thinks slow in this weather. She steps back from the edge by a habit she never questions. "Is this the place?" she asks, and hates that her voice wants to be a whisper. The chain Echo moves again, this time back toward the road. and stops where a memorial would go if anyone had put one. No flowers, no ribbon, just space. She raises a hand without meaning to, an old road signal, hold. It holds. She walks to the prints and sees what she missed. In the first pair, at the farthest edge, there's a crosshatch that isn't tire. 2 sets of shallower diamonds, smaller, like youth. Kid chain, not truck chain. Bicycle. The pattern is wrong for rubber. It belongs to metal wrapped around small wheels against a winter nobody should have sent them into. If you discovered a shape that changed the story from odd to human, would you let it change you too? She crouches because the moment deserves knees. The small diamond pattern sits inside the big pattern like a story inside a stronger one. Someone brought chains to a bicycle. Someone taught them how to wrap and latch and check tension with fingers that had their own work to do. It explains just enough to make the air go colder. The truck echo idles in place close to her right shoulder and waits. Mara stands and looks down the grade. A Subaru creeps up in low gear, hazard lights on, a driver hunched forward in that way people get on winter roads even when it helps nothing. She steps out, points them through with a calm, steady palm. The driver nods twice and mouths a thank you, eyes wet. While they pass, the chain echo quiets itself, like any good second truck would do while a civilian navigates a tight place. When the road is theirs again, she walks back to the plow and lays a hand on the hood as if soothing an animal. "All right," she says to the truck and to whatever uses her track. "I'll give you one more clean lane to the west gate. After that, you tell me if there's anywhere else you want marked." She pulls out. The echo falls in behind her, half a beat. They move like they've been trained together. She notices that the echo's rhythm changes in small ways, faster under the spruce canopy, slower near the long slope where the sun takes until noon to touch the lane. The patterns make sense in the way that habits make sense. Someone taught them, and the teaching took. On the radio, dispatch asks for an update from Unit 12. She gives the plain facts: grade passable, drifts light, wind pushing at mile 8, visibility fair. She adds a request she didn't know she was going to make. "If we've still got those reflector sticks in the barn, send a bundle to the pull-off. I want sight lines on the rail posts for the next storm." "Copy," dispatch says. "You after memorial markers?" "After sight lines," she says. No argument. The road deserves better eyes. If a story wants to live in the markers, it can live there on its own. They ride the ridge. The day is fully itself now. Snow dust moves like a skin on the air. Bird calls are small but present, brave and silly all at once. The echo keeps time and Mara feels something change. The sound isn't just following, it's learning. Her brake taps become soft clicks inside a cab that isn't there. Her turn indicator seems to live in 2 dashboards. Her hands dictate a curve, and something else finishes the line with a grace nobody taught it this morning. You've been teaching someone without knowing it, and they're showing you what's stuck. Do you keep teaching, or do you pull away so they learn to stand alone? At the West Gate turnout, she takes the long loop instead of the short one, and makes the cleanest path she can through the hard ridge the plows always leave there. The invisible driver follows, climbing out of the ruts and settling into the fresh channel like it's grateful. She stops at the gate and lets the engine idle while the chain echo idles behind. She waits, the sound holds. "All right," she says, her voice quiet enough that it feels like a touch instead of words. "This is where I leave. If you've got more road, take it. If you've got fewer winters left than you wanted, this lane is yours until the next storm erases it." The echo lifts, just a hair, and then begins to glide forward. It moves beside her door, invisible mass in motion. Snow puffs at the imaginary wheel wells. For a second, she smells something she hasn't smelled since she was 12 and rode in the cab of her uncle's pickup on a delivery route, coffee and wool, and the faint copper of coins in a dish. A shape crosses her path in the mirror, where no shape should be, only the kindness of a trick of light, the suggestion of a hood, the memory of a grill, the idea of a bumper sticker with a cartoon moose. Then it's gone, and with it, the sound. The lane remains, the prints at the pull-off remain, the tag at the rail keeps its number. The road looks ordinary again, a thing for tires and time. The radio cracks with a fresh call about a slide-off by the covered bridge. She answers the way she always answers. On my way. What do you keep from a moment like that? The exact pattern of a diamond in snow? The sound of a chain you couldn't see? Or the decision to drive like someone is learning from you, even when you think you're alone? She pulls on to the grade and lets the blade write one more careful line down the mountain, slower than necessary, steadier than usual, because maybe that's what the morning asked for all along. Afternoon. Light turns pewter, the kind that flattens edges and steals distance. Wind leans east and drags a slow curtain across Route 73. Radios trade short updates, mile marks, school pickups, a deer by the culvert. Mara answers in that calm crew voice and keeps the plow steady. Blade sings, spinner ticks, engine hums like a low hymn. She reaches the CCC pull-off and eases down. The morning prints have softened under fresh fall, yet deeper pockets still hold the shape of chain crosshatch, like breath marks under frost. The brass tag on the rail, 9, gleams through powder. She brushes it clean with a glove and stands a moment with the view, pine crowns, white river bends, a hill that remembers more winters than any crew. A question settles in your ribs when a place seems to carry its own count. Do you work by the book, or match its rhythm and see where it takes you? Back in the cab, she swings north toward the grade. Snow grows thick and bright like fog with weight. Her headlights carve a tunnel with soft walls. She eases the throttle and lets the truck ride the center groove she cut all morning. Then the sound arrives again, no longer half a beat behind. Chains ahead, light and exact, laying a lane just in front of her hood. 1-2, 1-2, cleaner than sight in this weather. It feels less like echo, more like invitation. She lifts her foot and lets the engine match that rhythm. The unseen truck, whatever carries that sound, holds the crown, kisses the inside of each curve, releases on the drop. Her hands follow as if a training wheel settled under the plow. The first hairpin rises, memory says right, then left, and the snow agrees. Her blade rides a quiet arc. Powder lifts at the far shoulder where a second set of tires would throw it. She sees no bumper, no glass, only the behavior of weight in snow, faint sprays where a vehicle would begin and end each turn. Would you follow a line you can't see if every habit in your body says it's true? She follows. The grade levels, wind opens a window in the cloud and sunlight falls, a narrow bar across the lane. For 5 slow heartbeats the road shows 2 paths, a fresh track and a narrower pair pressed an inch deeper, diamonds crisp inside the tire shape. The light closes and the view folds back to white. The sound keeps on. Halfway to the ridge, radio static crackles and clears. No voice comes through. She flips the defroster a notch higher and lets silence carry the lane. At the long S-curve, the chains ahead tap twice. Tiny metallic syllables a driver would make to warn a follower. Easy here. She taps her brake twice in reply and feels the plow settle. Snow curls off the blade in a soft scroll that lands exactly where the other lane leaves room. 2 trucks in practice, one body doing the work. Past the spruce canopy, the storm shifts from flakes to dry glitter. Her windshield becomes a soft screen of shining dust. The leading rhythm grows faint, then bright again, as if the hill breathes through it. She keeps pace. She can feel a cab beside her, smell wool and old coffee in a memory she never owned, the copper hint of coins in a cup. A short straight opens. The sound eases right to the shoulder, lingers at post 9, then returns to centre like a hand finishing a count. She doesn't speak. She just nods once and keeps the blade down. The ridge arrives almost by surprise. Those 3 birches, that shoulder rock, the wind that always turns from the quarry cut. The leading chains lift, 1, 2, and fade forward as if a driver waved her through. You've got it from here. Sight returns in gentle inches. A jay calls. The grade loses its teeth. If a lesson hands back the wheel after teaching your hands its shape, do you keep the shape when no one is watching? She rolls into the turnout and sets the brake. Heater fan low, engine a warm animal under the hood. No second sound now, only wind and the light rattle of links cooling on rubber. She rests her forehead on the rim of the wheel for a breath, then clicks the mic. Unit 12 at ridge turnout, lane holds, visibility fair in pockets. Copy, dispatch says. Window through dusk looks good. Finish from the top. She pulls back onto the road. Her lane runs smooth. The mountain feels lighter, like a chest, after a cough leaves. In the mirror, snow closes over the path, the way a lake takes back a thrown stone. She drives the rest of the pass with that new shape in her hands. Brake taps given early, arcs drawn wide where grief once lived, patience poured into the crown. At the pull-off, she slows and sees only clean surface, rail posts wearing simple hats of snow. The brass tag still shines. The small bike chain she covered this morning stays tucked under its white napkin. She whispers a simple promise to the grade. No ceremony, just a working vow. I'll keep this line honest. Then she drops the blade and carries the lane home. Morning breaks pale and careful. The storm has stepped back a pace, leaving every spruce tipped with sugar and the river wearing a low scarf of steam. The yard smells like diesel and coffee. Men clap gloves and trade simple plans. Mara checks Unit 12 like a ritual, pins seated, chains snug, spinnergate moving clean. She touches each crosslink with her glove and feels the tight right hum in her palm. She rolls out before sun clears the ridge. The first mile is easy, straight flats where the blade writes its usual stripe and the salt fans into a soft, ticking arc. As she climbs, blue hour folds over the grade again, kind enough to show contours, grey enough to erase distance. At the CCC pull-off, she sets the brake. The brass rail tag, 9, shows through a new dusting. She brushes it with 2 knuckles and looks down the slope. Pines hold last night's wind in their arms. Somewhere below, the river ticks against ice. No prints today. The storm used its big eraser. She feels relief first, then a small ache that surprises her. When a place wipes the page for you, do you thank it? Or write the line again so others can read it? Back in the cab, she keys the radio. Unit 12 at pull-off. I'm requesting reflector sticks from the barn. I'll set them on the posts. 10 through 12. Good sight line for the next storm. Dispatch answers quick. Copy. Bundle is in your cab bay. Swing by on your second pass. She climbs toward the ridge. The chain rhythm in the cab is only hers today. The echo that taught her yesterday has gone off to wherever work goes when it's finished. She keeps its shape in her hands anyway. Early brake taps, wide arcs at the blind curbs, a generous crown held steady over the long drop. At the hairpin she hears the old half-beat in memory and turns as if someone is close enough to learn again. Mid-morning, town calls in a slide-off at the covered bridge. A sedan kissed the rail and can't back out. Mara heads down, blade up, and nose eases around traffic that's stacked up like shy animals. The driver stands outside the door, hat crooked, embarrassment beating out fear now that nobody is hurt. Mara walks the situation with her eyes first. Ice sheen, wheel angle, the way snow berms have grown a lip under the rail. "We'll lift you free easy," she says. "Hands on the wheel straight. When I say roll, you feather, not stomp." She lays sand behind the rear tires like a short runway. Two bystanders, good neighbours, lean their shoulders where she points. She counts the rhythm the way she counted breaths with the mountain yesterday. 3, 2, roll. The sedan slides back into the lane, relief rattling in its hubcaps. The driver thanks her too many times and promises better tyres by Christmas. On her way back to the grade, she hears a faint chain rattle where no truck is. It's only the wind tugging a road sign, objects in mirror, but it makes her smile anyway. She takes the long loop at the west gate and makes it smooth enough that a second vehicle, seen or unseen, could take it without arguing. When she swings through the yard for the reflector bundle, Ray meets her at the bay with a grin and a finger jabbed at the newspaper. Front page, county considering guardrail upgrades. He sets the sticks on her bumper. "Your idea?" he asks. "Sightlines," she says. Easier to plow true when the posts show even in whiteout. He cocks his head. Sounds like a memorial that doesn't say it out loud. "Just good eyes," she answers and lifts the bundle into the cab. By afternoon, the light dulls again, a silver that makes the world feel polished and far away. She sets the reflectors at posts 9 through 12, each one a little bright tab that will glow when headlights interrogate snow. She presses each base into frozen shoulder with her heel and leans back to see how a driver climbing in weather will read them. The line isn't pretty, it's honest. That is what a road needs. At post 9, she pauses longer. She sets 2 reflectors, one on the post, and one on a short stake a foot inboard, an extra bead on a string, so the curve makes sense to an anxious driver. She doesn't speak, but the quiet around her feels like attention. If you could leave one small thing that changes how a bad stretch behaves, would you leave your name on it, or let the road keep the credit? She leaves no name. She leaves alignment. On the last climb, as daylight thins toward that blue that helped name this story, the half-beat comes back, only once, only small. A soft clink in her mirror, where powder rises and falls as if a narrow pair of tires is learning the lane again. She doesn't look hard. She keeps her eyes where they belong and lets the sound visit, then go. At the ridge turnout, she sets the brake and idles, window cracked a thumb for the clean air. The grade below her holds the line she wrote, white center, ridged, shoulders banked, posts tagged, with little day bright eyes. It looks ordinary. Ordinary is what safety looks like when you've done it right. She clicks the mic. Unit 12, ridge to town, clear, visibility fair. Reflectors set 9 through 12. Copy, dispatch says. Good work. The words land heavier than usual. She sits with them a breath longer than a worker usually allows. On the way down, the bakery throws steam onto the street again. The skin of the fog catches on her windshield's lower corner and makes a small cloud with nowhere to go. Kids in snow pants bunch at the bus stop, hats yelling colour into a grey day. A boy, 3rd grade maybe, steps to the curb and stares like he's watching a parade float. He lifts both hands and mimes a chain, 2 small circles, fingers interlaced. She lifts her hand from the wheel and winks a headlight, a quiet hello back. By the time she reaches the town line, fresh flurry starts. Small chips, quick and dry. She lifts the blade and taps the horn twice, her uncle's old sign-off after a lonely night, the one that says the route is ready for other people's lives. 2 notes hang in the air and then dissolve the way sound does in snow. The yard is bright when she returns. Men are cutting pallets for kindling, someone's dog is shaking snow in ecstatic misery, and a mechanic in a wool cap is explaining to an unamused carburetor why it should keep working. Mara logs her pass, times, miles, salt used, reflector placement, and adds a line at the bottom that matters only to whoever reads with the same ears. Blue hour taut. I kept the shape. She steps outside with her thermos and stands by the chain rack, where spares hang in neat loops. If a camera looked only at her face, it would see a woman taking a break. Inside, she is saying goodbye to a sound that made the mountain kinder for a day. If something once walked behind you and then led you and then left, the best way to thank it is to hold what it taught when the weather changes. Twilight comes early. The ridge holds a thin purple bruise against the sky. She closes the thermos and heads home on foot. No rush, boots finding their old rhythm on the lot's packed paths. In the hospital parking lot she passes on the way, a knit cap sits on a dashboard, and an IV pole reflects a hallway light. People are still finding their ways through winters that have nothing to do with roads. That night, sleep takes her quick, but not before she hears, inside her own breathing, the clean, modest math of the lane. 1, 2, 1, 2. It isn't a haunting, it's a habit. She smiles into the pillow the way a driver smiles when the truck does exactly what it should. On her next shift, in the first blue of a new morning, she rounds the CCC pull-off and sees a tidy triangle of animal tracks stitched across the shoulder. Fox, light-footed, choosing each step with care. The reflectors throw a soft blink when her headlights sweep. The brass tag on post 9 is bright as a coin. The road is ready. She drops the blade and writes the first line of the day with a steady hand. If someone is learning behind her again, they'll have a fair teacher. If no one is there, the count still holds. Either way, the mountain keeps its own, and she keeps hers. January presses flat on Bristol Bay. The cannery sits quiet with its roofs white and low, a line of shuttered windows facing a river that breathes steam when tides turn under cold. Inside, belts are still, tables upended, and floors scrubbed to that winter clean that smells like bleach and cedar. The people have gone, seasonals flown out, bunkhouse emptied, lunchroom chairs stacked to the rafters. What stays is one man, a dog, a set of keys, and heat slow enough to be careful. His name is Henry Cho, 41, winter over maintenance. In season, he fixes everything the fish try to take. Cutters, pumps, the flat conveyor that throws silver bodies toward men with knives and women with patience. Off-season, he keeps water from bursting pipe and wind from finding doors. He likes winter work because it's honest in a different way. No hurry, just checks done right, and a building that answers back if you listen. He sleeps in the foreman's office because it has a couch and because the pellet stove there ails and he can mind it. His dog, Mako, sleeps on the rug with his head tucked to his paws, ears learning every sound the building makes, so Henry can rest when he does. The weather radio mutters from a shelf, ice fog, gusts at 20, -12, and falling. Outside, the pile field ticks in the cold. Inside, the time clock in the hallway by the locker room keeps its slow shudder of a spring as it waits for nobody. The thing about a shut cannery is the way smell leaves. During season, the air keeps a hum of salt and fat and metal. In winter, the hum drops to 2 notes, oil and clean. That's how Henry knows when something has entered that shouldn't. He keeps lists, not on paper, on rounds. Boiler at 23 psi, good. Pump house inline heater ticking, good. Crawl space drip tray, dry. Dock door 3-chain tight. North sash rattling, wedge it with cedar. Time clock dead quiet as it should be, and then the first morning he doesn't find it quiet. It is 2:26 a.m., a number his body recognizes because it wakes at 2 for a walkthrough, then again at 6 to make coffee. He leaves the foreman's office, pulls on his lined coat, eases the door closed so Mako can keep sleeping, and steps into the main hall that runs between the locker room and the time clock. A night like this makes sound sharp. His boot soles work on a scatter of salt he threw before bed. The pellets in the stove give a soft, starving noise that says, "Feed me soon." He lets them wait. The walk-through comes first. He does the pump room, hums good. He does the freezer, shuts a vent that forgot its job. He does the bunkhouse, stands in the doorway for a breath, because a building that's empty needs someone to say hello anyway. When he turns back toward the hall, the time clock hits with a single tick that doesn't belong to weather or wind. It's the tick of the spring catching and the stamp cylinder coasting to a stop. He stops moving. The quiet after a stamp is loud. He knows that quiet. In season, that machine prints a fresh minute on a card, and the rack swallows and grins as men and women line up to mark time. Tonight there are no cards in the slots. He took them out. He boxed them and stacked them in the office under his jacket. If you heard a time clock stamp a minute when nobody is here, would you walk to the rack and look? Or would you leave it be and keep the door chain as your promise that this is just a building? Henry walks. He keeps his steps measured because buildings notice if you pretend you're not scared. The time clock sits with its grey metal face and the little window where a date wheel displays a clean 1/12 year like a polite caller. The handle rests where hands leave it. The card rack beside it hangs empty, except there is one card in slot 23. He knows because he left them all gone to get ready for winter. He counted the blanks, held them like a deck, slid them into a box. Slot 23 is now full by the exact amount a card is, a thin plane of tagboard showing just a hair past the rack's metal lip. He puts his fingers on it and the dog inside him wants to pull back. He doesn't. He draws it out slow and looks. The card is clean, white, fresh. It hasn't gone damp the way paper goes damp when a building owns it too long. Across the top, a name lives in block letters the way names live when people write them once a season and then never again. Alma Brower. Below, the first line shows a stamp in purple ink, neat and exact, where in-season shifts begin. It reads, 0217. He has a moment to notice ink sheen. New. The second stamp sits under it, midnight state in smaller numbers, 0226. That one will be his. He is holding the card. He is standing in front of the machine. The machine stamped when he was walking back. He didn't see it happen. You never see the first strange thing. You just see the detail that proves it. He turns the card over to check if someone used last season's leftovers, the ones with a coffee ring from August and a name written in a hurry. Fresh. He runs his thumb along the edge. The tagboard whispers in his skin. He looks down the rack at empty slots, 24 through 80. He looks at the floor. No melt, no grit. Someone else would have left. No scuff where a boot slid. The skin between his shoulders learns new weight. If a building slides a name back into a place you cleared, do you accept that it knows more than you do? Or do you start taking names out of rooms like you're sweeping for mice? He sets the card on top of the rack so it doesn't stare at him from the slot like a person's eye. Then he does the thing that separates men who lie to themselves from men who don't. He searches for how ordinary could explain this. The cut guide could be loose. The stamp could have fired on a fallen piece of cardboard. Wind could have licked the handle down and the spring could have found the last bit of preloaded energy. He leans on the machine, tries the lever. It resists like it should. He looks for a cut piece of card scrap. The floor is clean. He looks for a draft. The hall is tight as January makes it. He breathes and decides to do nothing loud. That is his rule in any storm, whether it's weather or the kind that lives in the body. He returns to the office, takes the box of time cards out from under his jacket, and sets it on the metal desk with the felted top. He counts the cards. He isn't checking inventory, he's checking his own sanity. 28 left. He knows there were 29. Laughter in summer at the punchline, "Don't punch out early," taught him the math of these little papers. Someone took one. Someone? Or the building did, the way buildings do when they keep rituals and the rituals refuse to leave. Mako raises his head from the rug, but doesn't stand. The dog listens through the wall, a kind of hearing Henry has learned to borrow. What do you hear when you stop trying to hear the strange thing and listen for the ordinary? He hears the pellet stove slurping a little too loud. He hears wind writing along the eaves. He hears the river's slow talk below ice. He feeds the stove and holds his hands to the heat and lets them sting awake. He puts water on for coffee because coffee belongs to anything you can't name. He puts the card on the desk instead of the rack because the rack feels like a mouth. He sits and looks at Alma Brower in block letters that mean someone lived and clocked and bought a coat with that pay. He asks himself the question that a quiet night forces on you. Is this a story from last season still finishing, or is this a new story beginning when no one asked it to begin? At 3:12, the weather radio calls -14. At 3:30, the pellet stove finds a content sound. At 4:05, Henry can't leave it alone. He takes the card back to the rack and slides it into slot 23 because if the building wants the card there, leaving it on his desk feels like arguing with the tide. He sleeps an hour by the stove, not because he trusts sleep to keep him, but because he trusts routine to keep him. He wakes at 6, makes coffee for real with grounds instead of the little instant packs the cannery keeps for emergency. He opens the door to the hall to let the smell roll out where memories live. He walks to the time clock because he can't imagine doing anything else. The rack holds Alma Brower, slot 23. The stamp window on the card displays 02:17 and 02:26, yesterday's night. The day brings out small jobs. He wraps a pipe near the dock that gets the draft. He wipes down a table that will gather dust whether anyone loves it or not. He opens the side door to vent the bleach and watches sea smoke like a ghost of water. 2 snow machines go by on the river and throw up diamond spray. One driver raises a hand. Henry lifts his in return because you always wave on this river. People live here by seeing each other. He thinks of Alma Brower. The name doesn't wear winter to him yet. He tries it against memory. He remembers an Alma on Slimeline, quick with hands and quicker with smiles, kept a thermos of tea with lemon peel floating in it, like earrings. She had a brother on another crew, or maybe that was another season. He tries to picture her hand on the card rack, her block letters written on a Friday when pay came, her mouth asking about overtime like it was a dance you could choose. He doesn't know if this is that Alma. He doesn't know if the name was picked by the building or by whatever moves through old places when people leave. When the sun raises itself into weak daylight and catches the frost on the upper windows like a man lighting a handful of matches and dropping them in a jar, Henry tells himself a simple truth. Tonight will decide if this is a story. 1 stamp is a mistake, 2 is a message, 3 is a pattern. If night 2 came and you could choose between taking the machine apart to prove a point or leaving it intact to make a point to yourself, which would you do? He chooses to leave it. He does add one thing, a test, not a trap. He takes a pencil and makes a small tick on the wheel inside the time clock's window, a pale graphite scratch next to the minute number, so faint it isn't real, unless you know to look. If the wheel turns again at 2:17, that scratch will move. He will know the machine did its job without hands. If the scratch stays and the stamp still lands, some other mechanic is working. He locks the locker room door for the first time all winter. He chains the dock doors as the foreman likes them chained for storms. He checks every window in the hall for a gap where a person could test him. He does this because he is not above being wrong. Then he takes Mako out for a short walk, just to feel the clean air scald the lungs into waking, and he sees the bay wearing that low fog scarf again, like the river is thinking about saying something, but hasn't decided. The day runs to quiet. The sun drops like it got tired. The last colour leaves the world, and the roofs turn back to shallow dunes. At 1:50 a.m. he feeds the stove. At Tula he stands in the hall with the lights off, because lights lie sometimes, and dark tells the truth. He can see the time clock in its shadow, just a square, darker in the middle where the ink window sits. Mako lies with his chin in the doorway, ears turned to the hall. The building breathes the way empty buildings breathe, deep, timed to temperature changes and wind against skin. Henry's breath joins it and becomes part of the count. He waits. 10 past the hour, a current runs through the bay outside, and the river answers with a sound that feels like a cello string plucked. The weather radio whispers a fresh degree below zero, a tiny victory for cold. The pellet stove tick-ticks as pellets fall. The scratch he made on the minute wheel waits with him, and he hates that he made it, because it turns the night into a test, and the night never wanted to be a test. It wanted to be a witness. At 2:17, the machine moves. It is small. It is absolute. A spring draws a breath and releases it. The lever dips the width of a finger. The stamp hits paper with that purple kiss that everyone knows on payday and nobody loves any other time. The minute wheel rolls like a tiny planet. The scratch he made leaves its spot and travels a fraction with grace, as if someone turned the universe by hand. He steps forward and the dog stands with him, because the dog knows that in winter you don't go alone even if you think you can. He draws the card out of slot 23. It shows a fresh hit on the new line, 0217. Right under it, a second stamp appears he cannot have made. So too 18, the machine's self-check, where the spring rebounds a heartbeat later if someone held the lever longer than usual. No one held it. The lever is still. The print sits there anyway, precise as math. He looks down the hall as if someone will laugh from a dark door and shout, "Got you?" No one laughs. The building does that quiet winter thing where it will let you say anything but will not answer. He turns the card in his fingers and feels where the ink bled a hair into fibers. He tastes iron in his mouth because fear always tastes like metal. Mako makes a sound low in his throat that Henry doesn't hear often. It isn't growl. It's a small, uneven hum that says the dog thinks the room is fuller than his eyes report. Henry lays his free hand on the dog's head and feels ears warm with blood. He doesn't shush him. He lets him speak. "Okay," he says to the air, because sometimes you have to register receipt. Okay. He could throw the breaker on the time clock. He could jerk the machine off its wall and set it face down on the floor. He could carry it to the dock and leave it to learn snow. If he does, the card will still find a stamp. He knows it now the way you know a tide table, and trust it even when your eyes don't show it yet. So he does the only thing that feels like a thing a man can do and still stand straight. He pushes the card back into slot 23 so the rack can keep its ritual. He puts his pencil back on the window and makes another faint scratch that will start tonight's wait for tomorrow. He checks the chain on the dock door without touching it hard. Don't make a new sound for a building already full of sound. He returns to the office and sits on the couch because the couch is the square of world that belongs to him. He watches the stove and lets the pellets fall and tries to remember a face for Alma Brower that isn't just a name, but the winter in his head won't give him one. If you had to choose what kind of witness to be, the kind that tells only what can be touched, or the kind that tells the count in a room even when the count comes from no hand, who would you be? He chooses count. He writes the time in his own notebook, what he heard, where he stood, how the scratch moved. He doesn't add anything a deputy would roll his eye at. He doesn't subtract anything to make himself more comfortable tomorrow. He closes the notebook and sets it face down so the truth lives like a small animal under a pan. At 3:02 he sleeps. At 5:59 he wakes. At 6:10 he takes the card from the rack and puts it in the box he said he would never use in winter, not to hide it, to keep it. He pours coffee and points his face at the little window where the sky forgets colour 3 times before breakfast. He waits for daylight to make everything look smaller. It doesn't. It only makes the building more itself. The belts gleam, the tables wait, the hallway breathes. And the time clock sits with its square face and its tiny universe of numbers ready to turn again at 2:17, whether people believe in it or not, whether the river breathes or not, whether Alma Brower ever finished the season she meant to or not. He feeds the stove and makes a decision that moves the next nights where he doesn't want them to go and must anyway. Tonight, he will be at the rack at 2:17 with his hand under the lever, palm ready for weight. If something comes down through that handle, he will feel it. If this building wants help with its ritual, he will give it. If it wants witness, he will give that too. And if the name needs to clock out as well as in, he will learn where to stand so the door that isn't a door can be found. Evening lowers like a lid. From the river, a slow white breath lifts and slides along the pilings. Inside the cannery, the pellet stove ticks like a patient animal, warm enough to keep copper pipes polite. Henry moves through rooms the way a lighthouse keeper used to, checking flame, listening for changes that don't belong. Mako pads behind him, nails soft on concrete, nose sorting the building's old scents from the night's new ones. He eats from a pan and tastes nothing much. That's what watchmen do in winter. They eat so they'll be steady later. By 1:50, his body knows where to be. He leaves the office door open so the stove can loan its heat to the hallway. He turns off the overheads and lets the dark carry shape. The clock on the wall above the locker room door shows 1:58, hands fat with frost shadow. At 2:05 he stands beside the time clock and rests his right palm under the lever, not touching, ready. The machine's metal carries the same chill as the window glass. He keeps his breath easy and lets the building decide how loud the hour should be. If it were your hand, would you brace hard against whatever comes, or leave a little give so you can feel what you're actually meeting? He leaves give. The first minutes pass with nothing but the small creak of wood drying and the far thump of tide under ice, a sound that always makes him think of someone carrying a couch down a stairwell and pausing at landings. He lets his eyes soften so peripheral things can speak. The dog places his chin on Henry's boot, content with the rule that says you wait together for the true thing, not the noisy one. At 2:17, the lever moves as if guided by careful fingers from the other side of the wall. It dips into his palm and meets him. No slam, no jerk, just a decision made and finished. The spring breathes out. The stamp kisses the card at slot 23 with that small purple sound 100 workers once carried in their bones. The minute wheel turns its tiny planet a notch. He feels the weight in the lever clearly now, not metal, muscle, not heavy, human. He holds not to stop it, to understand it. Pressure lives there the way a hand lives on a door it knows well. Warmth does not come through metal, but intent does. The lever lifts again with a pace that belongs to someone who punched a clock more than once, someone who knew exactly how far to push and how little to waste. He draws the card and sees the mark. 0217, today's date, today's ink, steady and clean. There is no second accidental hit this time. The lever hesitated in his palm. Whatever drives it, adjusted, and left only the one mark. The correction feels like manners. He doesn't speak. He sets the card back and listens for the building to release its breath. The hallway doesn't change. The air holds its same honest cold. He hears the soft pat of Mako's tail on the concrete once, as if the dog agrees that something just happened that is neither danger nor comfort, just truth. If a ritual reveals its weight to you, do you treat it like a machine to be fixed, or like a promise you agreed to keep before you knew it? He keeps the promise. He does a round because the body needs an errand after the mind learns something it can't fix. Boiler hum, freezer door latch, bunkhouse heat, dock chain sway, all as they should be. Back in the hall, he notices the locker room door has settled a fraction out of square from the cold. He shoulders it open and lets the smell of old soap, stale shampoo and cedar slat benches come up like a familiar song. Lockers stand open, all except one near the end. Number 23 shows a plain padlock with a strip of canvas ribbon tied to its shackle. He knows the ribbon trick. In season, people tie things to what matters so they can find it fast with sore hands. He didn't lock these for winter. He left them open so air could move. This one is shut. He returns to the office and pulls the tray where they keep the locker keys. The foreman wrote numbers in pencil on each tag years ago. He finds 23 and feels the tag rough with old fingerprints. Back in the locker room, he tries the key. The lock opens smooth, as if serviced yesterday. Inside hangs a blue parka with a mended elbow, a knit hat the colour of dried kelp, and a thermos dented in the middle. On the shelf sits a limp paper lunch sack with a name in block letters that matched the time card, Alma Brower. Inside the sack, 2 paper-wrapped tea bags and half a lemon hardened into a small, light-coloured stone. He doesn't take anything. He doesn't touch the parka. He lets the sight of it do the work. A person's life rarely leaves all the way. Buildings remember. He closes the door on air, not on answers, and sets the lock but doesn't click it. The canvas ribbon lies against the metal like a last small gesture that never got tired. Back in the hall, the card stays in slot 23, ink bright. He tries to call up a face for the name and cannot. Seasons blur people unless a story hooked them in you, a joke, a burn scar, a way of laughing. He thinks of tea with lemon peel floating like earrings. He might be borrowing someone else's memory. He carries the thought to the office and sets coffee to drip through the filter. While it runs, he thumbs through the small binder with contact lists. Nobody updates, as often as they say they will. Brower appears twice. One number blotted out with a note from Summer. Out of service. One with no area code, just a name. Brother, Eli. He could chase it. He could spend days making calls that may or may not land. He knows the feeling he'd be chasing isn't curiosity. It's debt. He isn't ready to pay it with a human voice yet. He pays with attention instead. The next night he stands with his hand under the lever again. The weight that finds him is the same, a practiced press from a hand that doesn't hurry. The stamp lands where it belongs, no misprint, no double. He does not flinch when the metal touches his skin. His body learns the pressure and catalogues it. Average woman's hand, firm, unafraid of work. On the third night, the stamp lands and then something else happens. Paper rustles in the empty rack as if a second card adjusted itself. He looks and sees nothing new. He listens again and hears a small sound from the hallway beyond, like rubber soles on polished floor. Mako's ears turn, Henry's neck hairs lift. He stays still. Some doors are shy, they open when you give them room. He hears water move in a pipe that should be quiet. He knows the run from the locker room showers to the main line by heart. He walks to the valve closet and sets his hand on copper. Warmth rides there. Not hot, used. He turns the valve wheel a quarter and feels the pipe ask to be left alone. He leaves it. He opens the shower room door with a finger. Steam ghosts the tile, thin as a thought. The smell that lifts is not bleach, it's tea, lemon peel and something floral. Would you step into steam that doesn't belong to the hour, or stand back and let whatever needs the heat finish its small mercy? He stands back. Steam cools in the time it takes a person to set a cup down and coat up. He closes the door when the air falls flat again and makes no note of it beyond the one his bones keep. The fourth night he brings an extra time card, blank, and writes his own name on it in small letters. He slides it into slot 24, the next space, and places his palm under the lever as usual. At 2:17 the lever dips. The stamp lands on Alma's card. At 2:18 a second dip, and his card receives the same purple mark. Not a mistake, a courtesy. The building has let him share the ritual without stealing it. He feels something repair inside him that he didn't know winter had worn down. He laughs once in his throat, and Mako makes that small, puzzled sound dogs make when people remember how to be people at odd hours. At noon, after checking the loafers' heaters and wiping the stainless rails to keep rust from pretending it belongs, he takes his coffee to the corridor with the time clock and sits on the floor with his back against the cool cinder block. He watches the square metal face the way people watch aquariums in waiting rooms. It watches nothing. It holds discipline. The minute wheel doesn't care about him. The rack is empty except for 2 cards side by side. Alma Brower, Henry Cho, names that don't know each other and never needed to, now touching by cardboard. If you could choose who keeps time with you in a quiet place, would you pick a friend, or would you accept the partner the building hands you? Dusk returns and shows him how the cannery wears its age. Paint at the baseboard scuffed to wood, a nail hole patched with gum in a summer when someone didn't want to fetch spackle. A strip of tape on the floor where a supervisor once marked a safe zone for pallets. The place isn't haunted, it's honest. That's what makes the strange thing heavier. It grows out of something true, of the next night brings wind hard enough to drum the siding. The lever still lowers with the same measured weight. He lowers his hand to meet it and says, before he can talk himself out of it, "If you need a door, I can open one." Nothing answers. The building will never be a movie. But the air at his cheek feels the way it does when a person steps close without touching. He keeps his voice level, not priest, not fool. If clocking in means clocking out, show me where to stand. The pressure on the lever lifts a beat early, like someone thanking him with their hand. He feels foolish for feeling anything and grateful for feeling foolish. After 2:17, he walks the long way around the plant, through the cutting room, past the conveyors that look like wide belts left on a chair, through the packing bay where the floor drains have little metal grins. On the far wall, the emergency exit sits chained for winter, padlocked through a hasp, the sign lit by a battery backup that refuses to die. In its red light, dust has a way of making rooms look like they're underwater. He tries the chain. It's set with a simple padlock, same kind as the lockers. He looks at the tag on his key ring. One is scratched Emerge 3. He tries it. The lock gives the tired sigh the right key always coaxes. He doesn't open the door. He only releases the chain and lays it on the push bar so nothing metal lies between someone and leaving. He steps back 2 paces and stands where a person would if they didn't want to block another person's way. If you had to pick one small change that might let a night finish, which would you choose? Unlock a door or say a name? He chooses both. "Alma," he says, the way you'd say it in a kitchen, not on a stage. Nothing moves. He doesn't redo the chain. He doesn't turn off the exit light. He just walks back the slow way and lets the building talk how it wants. When morning comes, he finds the chain still lying across the bar, padlock hanging like a dull bell. A dust line marks where the chain used to lie. A new line begins where it rests now. He picks up the lock and resets the chain with slack enough for a fast pull. He isn't trying to invite a trespasser. He's trying not to be one himself. He starts to believe that the work is simple. Be present. At 2:17, hold the lever so the weight has something to meet. Leave a way out. Keep heat where heat is merciful, and don't decorate the story. Some nights deliver only that, a ritual kept, a door unchained, tea in the air from a shower that shouldn't run, nothing to report, everything to remember. Then a morning arrives with sun like hammered tin, and a band of ice fog laying low at the river's shoulder, and a new thing waits in the rack. Slot 25 holds a card written in a hand more careful than his. E. Brower. Under the name, a purple stamp glows wet. 0216. 1 minute before Alma's. He does not look away. He lets the math land. Brother, he thinks, or father. Someone who learned to punch before she did and still does, even now. He tips his head the way you do when a sound arrives from an angle you didn't plan for. If the count widens and you realize you've been attending one person while another stands just behind, do you try to serve both or ask the first to lead you? He doesn't ask anything. He places his palm under the lever the next night and feels 2 weights arrive, one after the other. Lighter first, then heavier, both exact, both practiced, both gone before his nerves finish their report. He knows what the job is now. Keep the count, honor the exit, carry no more than you can set down, and when the building gives a name, say it once, out loud, so the night knows you're not pretending you don't live here too. Stormlight smooths every edge. By midnight, the river is glass under breath, and the cannery sits like a ship run aground on purpose, secure, quiet, stubborn. Henry walks his rounds with the steadiness that keeps a place from thinking it's alone. Mako follows, never rushing, ears tuned to that other frequency building's hum when they want to be understood. At 1:56, he kills the hallway lights and lets the dark do the clarifying. A building tells the truth better without glare. He stands beside the time clock with his palm lifted under the lever, a fraction below, not touching, ready to meet rather than stop. If this were your hand, would you lock your wrist and brace, or soften, so you can learn the shape of what arrives? He softens. The second hand on the locker room wall climbs, a fat shadow on frost. At 2:16, a pressure finds the lever, sure, deliberate, a touch with years in it, and lowers into his palm. The stamp lands in slot 25, E. Brower, 0216. The weight lifts and is gone like a habit performed and put away. 1 breath later, 2:17, another hand lives in the metal. Lighter, practiced, no waste. Alma Brower, 2:17. The liver pauses half a heartbeat, as if whoever holds it feels another hand under theirs, then rises without the accidental double that marked earlier nights. The rack breathes paper quietly as if satisfied. The hallway holds its cold. Mako's tail gives a single patient thump. It feels less like haunting, more like attendance, 2 workers who keep a promise whether a foreman stands here or not. When a ritual includes you without asking, do you step out or step into your part? Henry slides his own card, Henry Cho, back into slot 24 and doesn't force the machine to notice him. He isn't the point. He turns to the long corridor and listens. The pellet stove ticks. The river under ice goes on talking in that low way men use at dawn truck stops. In the locker room, water somewhere changes its mind. He opens the door with 2 fingers. No steam this time, just the faint, clean smell of tea. Lemon, light as memory. Down the far hall, the emergency exit glows its battery red. He unhooked the chain last night and left the padlock on the hasp like a bell with no clapper. He walks toward it now, slow, because some doors notice hurry and close out of spite. Would you open a door for someone you can't see, trusting that leaving is part of the mercy? He sets his hand on the push bar and doesn't push. He stands to the side where you stand if you're giving room to pass. The red light hums in. That way, exit signs hum, the quiet electricity of a promise. Behind him, something small changes, the faintest grit sound on concrete, as if souls that remember resin floors are testing winter traction. He doesn't turn. Mako lifts his head to a height that lets him see the air at knee level and then lowers it again, content to watch without correcting. The building shifts its own breath. Heat pools closer to the door. The red rectangle thickens in the dark, becomes a truly warm color instead of a sign. The bar gives under his hand, not pushed, accompanied. Cold from outside threads through the crack, needles his wrist, finds the hair on his forearm, and sets it upright. The door opens a hand width. The wind lifts and pauses like a person looking to see if anyone objects. He stays off to the side. The space beside him aligns with the open slice. The cold grows specific, the kind that carries river, wood smoke from a distant stove, blown salt from the bay. Sometimes the kindest thing is to take one step back. Would you? He does. The air moves past, the smallest slip of colder air, the whisper of weight choosing away. The bar eases back. The door fits its frame again without latch noise, just that suction sound doors make when the pressure equalizes. The red light returns to being a sign instead of a sunset. The hallway feels less full. He doesn't call out. He doesn't ask for proof. He just stands until his own breath slows to the count a body uses after someone leaves a room without slamming anything important. Marco leans his shoulder to Henry's calf and stays there a moment, like a weather vane at rest. On the way back, he passes the time clock and stops because the rack is not as he left it. Slot 25 holds E. Brower stamped 02.16. Slot 23, Alma Brower, still shows its fresh 02.17. Slot 22, empty a minute ago, now carries a blank card the machine has kissed with a single purple line at 0218. No name, no pen, just the mark the machine makes when someone who knows shifts and schedules, punches for lunch, or out on the far column. If a place starts finishing a count you didn't know needed finishing, do you insist on writing names, or let the math stand for what it stands for? He lets the math stand. He sets his palm under the lever again at 2:26, the minute the first stamp ever startled him, and feels the metal dip without weight, a thin mechanical nod. The blank card takes a second mark at 02:26. Oddly, the ink gleams more than it should in the hallway's dark, like something proud of being exact. He doesn't sleep. He brews tea from the lemon stone and the paper bags in Alma's locker, a tribute his mouth won't love but his hands need to make. He stands in the open office door and lets the scent go where the clock can smell it. He says nothing. He remembers what the foreman said in season. When a piece of gear worked perfectly all day, don't bless it out loud. Just before dawn, the weather radio whispers a wind shift, and the pellet stove takes the cue to hunger. He feeds it, and then makes a round that is more looking than touching. In the cutting room, a belt sighs under its own weight. In the packing bay, a floor drain gives a pop as metal contracts. In the bunkhouse, the air holds 1 more degree than yesterday. None of it is proof. All of it is the kind of change buildings choose when people have been kind. He returns to the hall at first grey and sees water. Not a spill, a trail. Two narrow parallel darks crossed the concrete from the locker room toward the exit, thin wet lines where something that held heat met the cold floor and surrendered it. The lines fade before the door. The last foot of concrete is dry, as if the air drank the evidence on purpose. On the bar, his handprint from an hour ago is the only clear shape. Down at the rack, the nameless card shows two marks, 0218 and 0226, both drying to that chalky finish time clocking gets when it's decided it's done. Alma's and Eli's cards sit quiet as plates after supper. You ever stand in the last clean version of a story and decide not to speak first, just so the day can come in without your opinion on it? He leaves the cards where they live. He boils coffee he actually wants and waits for a slice of pale to raise itself along the windows. When it comes, it brings the sound of snow machines on the river and gulls being ridiculous at 20 below. He walks to the door, opens it wide to show the day he kept a promise, and steps out onto the dock. The bay wears a skin of ice with lanes of black river threading it, steam lifting like breath from a horse. On the near drift, under the corner of the loading ramp, two shapes sit like fossils left by gentler weather. The round ends of punch cards melted halfway into crust. He crouches. They're only impressions. Paper was here, briefly, then gone. The wind gets in under his hat and makes his eyes sting. That's weather. He lets it. He goes back inside and writes 3 lines in his notebook in the plain way he'd want someone to tell it if he weren't around. 0216, E. Brower, in. 0217, Alma Brower, in. 0218, 0226, out. He closes the notebook and fits his palm under the lever once more, not because the hour asks it, but because that's where it belongs. He thinks of the door and the air moving past his sleeve and how the pressure felt like a thank you pressed into metal. If you were keeping a place for someone who left before the season ended, would you keep the count tomorrow too? He will. One more night. And if the cards stop asking for him, he'll chain the door the way a daykeeper should, with slack and respect. If they arrive again, he'll stand where hands want to meet a lever, and he'll give the room the word it seems to want least and most at once. Done. The next night comes without surprise. Wind low, snow soft, river breathing under ice. The cannery feels lighter, as if whatever it was holding has been set down. Henry walks his rounds slow, touching every latch, every rail, every familiar sound. The metal under his gloves feels honest again, just steel, not memory. Mako follows close, tail quiet, the way a dog moves when it knows a story's ending. He reaches the hall. The time clock waits, slots 23, 24, and 25, filled, side by side, 3 names, 3 minutes, the count perfect. He doesn't add another card. He doesn't erase the old ones. He just stands with his hand under the lever at 2:17, ready, the way a man stands at a door he already opened once. The lever stays still. The silence feels kind. It's the sound a room makes when work is finished. He breathes once, twice, and lets it be. Would you believe me if I told you the most peaceful sound in the world is a machine that's finally quiet? He leaves the clock alone and walks the long corridor toward the dock. The red exit light hums its small, steady hum. The padlock still hangs loose, chain folded like a belt beside it. He pushes the bar and lets the night air through, a single pulse of cold river wind that smells clean, not strange. On the drift outside, his boot finds a clear line of prints heading out toward the ice. Small, light, side by side, fading where the wind smooths them. He smiles without trying to. He knows what a finished path looks like. He closes the door softly, not to seal it, but to let the hinges rest. Back in the office, The stove purrs. The flame shows that slow orange confidence of something fed and content. He takes his coffee to the desk, opens the notebook, and writes one word. Done. He sits a while, watching the steam rise from his mug until it looks like river fog lifting at first light. The dog shifts, sighs, and drops his head back on the rug. Outside, the bay gives its usual low groan, the sound of ice stretching, not crying. For the first time since the first stamp, the building feels empty in the right way. If you were him, alone in that calm, would you stay another winter just to be sure the silence keeps its promise? Or would you hand over the keys to the next caretaker, knowing some places only need to be witnessed once? He gathers his coat, leaves the notebook on the desk, and unhooks the keyring. Before stepping out, he glances down the hallway one last time. The clock face gleams in the dark, no ink wet, no lever tense, just a machine at peace. He nods to it the way people nod to graves, not out of fear, but gratitude. He locks the main door, pockets the keys, and walks toward the river. The morning shows its first grey, soft enough to feel like forgiveness. Would you look back if you knew the place would keep time without you? Hey, lamps low again. Let's slow the breath before we go in. Hold. Out. That's better. Out. That's 3 stories tonight. 3 places that finished their own count. If one detail stayed with you, type the timestamp in the comments so we can all find it. Tell me your city, your local time, and what you're listening on, so the night map can grow. Before you sleep, here's my question. If a place could ask for one last kindness, a small one, like a door unchained or a minute kept, would you give it? If this kept you company, wait until the video ends to subscribe. Then tap the bell so the next file finds you when the night's ready. Alright, lights down, rest easy.